Welcome to PixelTunes Radio,
a podcast where we have fun
talking about video games
and video game music.
I'm Mayor Mike Haggar.
And I'm Bread.
And I'm Bruce Irons.
And this is episode 175, are we at now?
No? 102.
Oh, it feels like 175.
No, 102 Final Fight Retrospective with our good friend Cam Childs.
Hey.
Otherwise known as Bruce Irons.
Bruce Irons, yes.
Yep.
So, Cam, how are you today?
I am awesome. I'm pumped to be here, and especially pumped to be talking about Final Fight.
Yes.
Always.
One of us came up with this idea for this show. I think it was you, me, maybe? It had been floating around for a long time.
Yeah, and we mentioned that we wanted to bring on Cam, so, because he's a big Final Fight fan, so...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is kind of an interesting look at Final Fight of pretty much all the games that have come out throughout the entire series. And we're going to be covering, everything through the ins and outs of the ups and downs, the highs and lows, etc. But
the highs and low lows.
The high highs and low lows, exactly. What's interesting about this episode is that it is the 102nd episode of PixelTunes, and on the second episode of PixelTunes that we did beat-em-ups. And we kind of haven't really returned to beat-em-ups since then. So this will be kind of a nice return to form.
This is kind of like a mirror version of... So like the second 100 episodes of PixelTunes is the upside down.
Yeah, we're in the upside down right now.
Tune Pixels Radio.
Yes.
Oh gosh.
That means we have to be all slimy and gross, though.
That's true. Well, I'm already slimy and gross.
Yeah, that's no change for me either.
Yeah.
I guess I'll stop showering before I show up. So, Cam, you have a very kind of intimate history with Final Fight based on your band, which is called the Mad Gear, which is the gang that appears in the first couple Final Fight games. So what about Final Fight really drew you to make a VGM cover band that revolves around that kind of universe?
Final Fight was like the second SNES cartridge I ever owned, I think. And I had no experience with the arcade machine prior to that. I think that's important to note because I seriously never even played the arcade game until like a couple of years ago, and I'd never seen it in person anywhere. So it was only like later when I was like a teenager that I realized it was an arcade game first. And it's also probably the reason why I enjoyed the SNES port so much was because I had nothing to be disappointed by. And now that's the narrative about Final Fight for the Super Nintendo, is that it sucks in comparison to the arcade version because there's no co-op, there's no Guy, which honestly when we got Guy later, it's like, who cares? But,
exactly, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. It's just, when you're 6-7 years old and just walking through the streets as Haggar and doing flying pile drivers, it's like, what more could you possibly want?
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it was... funnier if you were a 6 or 7 year old walking through the streets just doing pile drivers on people.
Like in real life.
Like in real life, yeah.
Hey, I didn't say I didn't do that. I that's just where I got my inspiration from.
Right.
So the sounds they make, the whole thing, it's like hilarious, but also, like I said, super fun. And then later on, when the idea was starting to form for the band and everything, it just occurred to me, it's like the Mad Gear just has a nice ring to it. It doesn't. It's kind of meaningless unless you're like the gear, their equipment is crazy mad. Like I have no idea what it's supposed to mean, but it just sounds cool. Going back to the SNES port, it's very horn heavy to some people's opinions, like to a fault. Like it sounds weird, but I've always thought it sounded great. And to me, it was like the Mad Gear's like house band or whatever. They have horns. It's not all guitar based, which was kind of the theory, or like one of the founding theories behind the band was that I didn't want it to just all be guitar stuff. Sometimes I thought it'd be cool if saxes or trumpets or whatever held the melody, and that's just the impression of what the band should be like from that soundtrack,
Absolutely. And if you're doing, game covers, especially covers from other games besides Final Fight, those horns lend themselves towards those lead melodies much more than guitar would sometimes anyway, so that all makes a lot of sense.
On the Super Nintendo in general, there's just a lot of horn voices. And again, they're kind of corny sometimes, or like I said, weird or synthy sounding, but I love them, and to me, that's quintessentially 90s. Just those synthy horn leads on the Super Nintendo. So,
do you know where the name the Mad Gear originally came from?
I know. Actually, I checked out the soundtrack to that racing game Is that what you're referring to?
Yep, yeah, LED Storm, which was called Mad Gear in Japan.
Yeah, I've meant to check out or pick one of those tracks and forgot about it. But yeah, I've never played the game. I don't know anything about it, but I have heard that before.
Yeah, I think we played a track from that, because actually Tim Follin did the Amiga version of that soundtrack, so I think we played it on our first Tim Follin episode.
Oh, nice.
So it had really good music. But originally in Japan, it was called the Mad Gear because it was like a bad Japanese translation of like Crazy Driver or something like that. You know, a guy racing with gears and he was mad. And so, you know, just one of those ridiculous, let's put two words together that sound funny.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's where it came from. And so they reused that as the gang name in Final Fight, which Capcom is kind of famous for. They reuse a lot of their names in their games. So
what about you for Final Fight? Because we talked about, Cam talked about his introduction to the series.
Final Fight, I always wanted it on the Super Nintendo when I was a kid, but my mom was ridiculously anti-violence when it came to our video games and cartoons. Like, I wasn't allowed to watch G.I. Joe or anything like that. So I'd always see Final Fight like on the shelves, like when the Super Nintendo first came out, because I got my SNES on launch day. So I was stuck with Super Mario World and Pilot Wings forever and ever and ever. Mm-hmm. And I would always see that picture with like Haggar facing off against that punk on the box, like on store shelves, and I'm like, I really want it so badly.
I love that art. That art is so great.
Isn't it fantastic? So my only experience with Final Fight was in the arcades, because I would go and play it in the arcade, because for some reason my mom didn't care what I played when I was in the arcade.
That's hilarious.
So my first impression of the game was the arcade version, and my brother and I would play 2 players. And then when I finally did get around to playing the SNES version, I think we rented it or something, I liked it. I thought it was a really faithful adaptation.
Sure.
I did kind of miss the 2-player version, because obviously my brother was sitting there watching me, or I was watching him, when 2 of us could be on the screen playing at the same time.
You guys didn't trade off, take turns?
We never did that.
Really?
No, we never took turns with first 1-player games.
Interesting.
I don't know. It just never occurred to us to do so. But yeah, so that was my first impression. I was aware of the limitations, but I did like the Super Nintendo soundtrack better. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because maybe I didn't even really pay attention to the arcade soundtrack, because it was always in a huge arcade where there was lots of sounds going on and stuff. But it was always one of my favorite games. I love the aesthetic. I love the gameplay. And so a game that I always still go back to. Probably one of my most played video games of all time, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of the same. I think it's funny that she was totally okay with you murdering turtles and Ninja
Turtles was okay. He-Man was okay.
Yeah, well,
but
you
no
mentioned
G.I. Joe.
Super Mario, Super Mario.
Oh, well, it's cartoony violence, I guess. I don't know. But
That's
actually
funny.
Punching people in the face was not appropriate.
Right.
Yeah, but He-Man could use his sword and,
You should have told her that it was a love story, because the 2 guys were looked like they were gonna They would look like they were gonna fight, but they could totally also look
her
like
being a Roman Catholic, that would have been even worse.
Oh,
so,
true, yeah. Final Fight for me, it was kind of the same thing. Well, sort of. Super NES was the first version that I got, and I remember renting it and really enjoying it. And I think the first time I owned it was, I remember I think I bought it. And then I ended up trading it for Shaq Fu. I don't know why. You know what it was? Because I was a huge basketball fan back then. And so I was also a big Shaquille O'Neal fan.
So it's like Shaq plus fighting game plus basketball. What could possibly go wrong?
Right, I didn't know, and that was a bad trade. But I later on got it back in my collection. Recently picked up a complete in-box copy of the Super Famicom version. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's easily in my top 10.
Yeah.
The very first Final Fight.
I agree.
I also kind of think maybe a Final Fight themed basketball game should happen. I mean, is it too late?
Ooh, I should we go for it.
Maybe? I don't know. I mean, if fans can make an RPG basketball game out of Charles Barkley's...
Dude, so as a defenseman, Mike Haggar could just take a guy with the basketball and spinning pile drive him into the hoop.
There you go.
And
get the points.
Haggar's team gets points for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my introduction, was the very first Final Fight. So we do have some PixelChat questions. We have one. It's from Cam Mount.
Ooh, Cam number 2.
Yep.
Yeah, Cam number 2. Or 3. Or 4. I don't know. I lost track at this point. He asks, in the grand scheme of things, do you prefer Streets of Rage or Final Fight? Don't just rely on music, consider gameplay and storyline as well.
I've only played Streets of Rage 2. I understand why people like the soundtrack. It's very well done for what it is, but house music is just not my jam. And I love how ridiculous Streets of Rage is. It's really weird, and there's just some bizarre stuff going on, like the jetpack guy and all that kind of stuff. So I have a feeling I would like it more if I knew more about it. But as for me, it's always going to be Final Fight.
Yeah, I agree. It's Final Fight hands down for me too. I think it's just faster. It's more easy to control. Like the original Streets of Rage was kind of a much slower game. The guys were smaller. It took a little bit more time for the characters to get across the screen. It just didn't feel like it flowed as well as Final Fight did. I love being able to like flip an enemy over you and like take out 7 guys at one time.
Yeah.
The way the guys would just run in from the sides of the screen and like try to chest bump you into oblivion. I don't know. Everything about Final Fight had more character.
Yeah.
And I do like the Streets of Rage soundtrack actually better than the Final Fight soundtrack, but that doesn't, like Cam said, don't take the music into account. The gameplay of Final Fight has always been where it's at.
It's funny, ever since I was, younger, because, I think I played Final Fight when I was like 9 or 10-ish, everyone I knew thought Streets of Rage was better. I'd never met anybody who thought that Final Fight was better.
Interesting.
Like, Final Fight the series.
Yeah.
Not the first game. Like, most people thought, well, the first game is really, really good, but it's not better than all 3 Streets of Rage games. That's what everybody that I've met has always said. I've always been of the same mindset as you guys, where Final Fight to me was always the more dynamic, more interesting franchise. The characters were brighter, more colorful, and more interesting. Whereas Streets of Rage always just felt like a cheap knockoff to me. I think that they did advance a lot more with combos and special moves and stuff than Final Fight did. But I think Final Fight eventually caught up, like with Final Fight 3.
Final Fight 3 had a lot of cool special moves and power
So
meters and stuff. Yeah.
I think that they did a really good job of kind of keeping up with the other beat-em-up franchises. Because if they just made a Final Fight 1 like again and just like kept remaking the same game with just different characters or whatever, it wouldn't have been as good. So they really did need to kind of renovate the tried and true beat-em-up franchise.
Exactly.
I think this is going to be an unpopular opinion amongst the 3 of us. We're probably in the minority, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I know. I definitely like to hear what our listeners think.
Yeah.
So definitely comment on the Facebook group which game was your favorite, Streets of Rage or Final Fight, and why. I'd like to get a discussion going on that for sure.
Definitely.
So, well, you guys want to get into our first song of the day?
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go chronologically. We're going to start with the very first Final Fight and end up in some of the more recent releases. Cam, Mike, and I each picked 4 tracks to contribute to the show, and so they're not going to be round robin like we usually do with a guest. We're going to go from earliest to latest. So, Cam, you picked the first track of the day. What did you pick?
I picked Big Katana Boss from, like you said, the original Final Fight for the SNES. It was composed by the great Junko Tamiya and arranged by Toshio Kajino.
All right, let's take a listen.
That was Final Fight for the Super NES. The track was Big Katana Boss, and that was the Super NES 1991 release by Junko Tamiya, and it was arranged by Toshio Kajino. I really dig this track. I mean, the whole Super NES soundtrack, to be honest, we could have just played that and I would have been satisfied. That is by far and large, my favorite version of Final Fight's soundtrack. And this track in particular is great because it's a great lead up to fighting Katana, who's also known as Sodom in the Super Famicom version.
Right. And this was always one of those bosses that I felt was one of the hardest. I would always end up losing most of my lives.
Oh, really?
On Katana.
Okay.
Well, just because he would dash and then become invincible, and I couldn't get that pattern down correctly.
Okay.
But the fact that this music is so upbeat and surf rock.
Yeah.
It almost has like an Alberto Gonzalez feel with that bass line, doodle-a-doon-doon, doodle-a-doon-doon. Like, it just kind of bops along. It was always a lot of fun to listen to. So I think that I give this track a lot of credit for helping me, like, finally be able to get past him. And I'm talking, like, the first couple times I played Final Fight that I was having trouble here. Not that I can't get by him now. But,
Sure.
But yeah, it was always...
Like you have nightmares about him right now.
I do sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, his name is Sodom. I associate this track with this stage very, very closely, and that's not always the case with me in VGM. So, Cam, what was the reason why you picked this particular one?
Well, first of all, I should mention the fact that I just realized something kind of interesting, and that's that in Final Fight, there's not necessarily boss music. Like, it's almost, each stage has usually 2 or 3 different themes going on. And you might get some music to come in, like, shortly before the boss, but it's never like, okay, he's here, here's the boss music. You know what I'm saying? Like, for Big Katana boss, like, it's, you get out of the subway car, you're in that alleyway before the wrestling ring, and it starts. And for Idai in the next level, it's, like, the music starts when you're in the cage match with the double Landors. So it's like there's not really a boss theme per se, so that's kind of interesting. But the theme itself, like, I just love the timbre of all the instruments, like everything's so punchy and clear, and that I appreciate even more when I listen to the arcade version, because I mean, even now I don't care for it very much, but the first time I heard it, I was like, this sounds so jumbled and like it just sounds like a big load of like metallic trash. And like it's like you can't make out the individual instruments. There's just it's just too busy. But to me, everything feels very clear and punchy. You can hear all the voices very clearly. I love how shreddy everything is. Like that sax line, no sax player could ever play ever. And it's just like, and it's just awesome. I love everything about it.
So I was actually just going to ask you that question. So as a music arranger for the Mad Gear, what? Like you would consider that lead melody to be a saxophone, or I almost kind of thought maybe it was a trumpet or something, like some kind of brass for sure. But yeah, you'd say sax?
I would consider the lead, the one that's playing like all those runs, I would definitely consider a saxophone. I think I've got the sound font for Final Fight, and that one was labeled just Buzz or something.
Okay.
So it's not that I can definitively say it's a saxophone, but that's the way my mind interprets it. Yeah, there's definitely that trumpet in the background doing the little do 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 do.
I would love to hear you guys cover this, but like you said, I don't think any saxophone player could really.
Well, yeah, we'd probably have to move that over to guitar or something, somewhere where it'd be physically possible to play, or we'd have to dumb it down.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, Mike, your thoughts on the Super... Well, we already kind of talked about the Super Nintendo version and all that stuff.
No, I love this soundtrack. Every single song is fantastic. I will say that I understand why people don't like the Super Famicom or Super NES version of Final Fight soundtrack. It's very abrasive at points. Some of the lead synths are very harsh sounding, and even those trumpets can get a little overbearing at points. But I mean, I think that nostalgia really carries this one for me.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I think it's a fantastic track. The game is great. It's win-win for me.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the history behind Final Fight, because I know we've talked about the game with Cam in the past, actually. I think when we did our Tough Tunes, we talked about Final Fight a little bit. Mm-hmm. We talked about, at that point, that we had all believed that Final Fight...
Did you just pull a special move?
Yeah. It was said that Final Fight was designed as a sequel to the original Street Fighter game, but according to interviews with the game's director, Oshiki Akamoto, and the lead designer, Akira Nishitani, they've said that it was originally a standalone title that was called Final Fight, and Capcom saw the game halfway through development and noticed that the original Street Fighter was getting a lot of attention in the arcades, so they decided, well, let's make this game into a sequel of Street Fighter, and we'll call it Street Fighter 89. So they started showing it at trade shows. Originally, everybody just thought that the game was originally developed as a sequel to Street Fighter, and that's where you get a lot of information on the net will tell you that. So after they showed it at trade shows as Street Fighter 89, Akamoto and Nishitani kind of went back to Capcom and said, look, we really don't think that this is a sequel. This is an entirely new game. It's an entirely different style of gameplay. You know, we're going full beat 'em up here instead of one-on-one fighting. So Capcom agreed with them, and they decided that they were going to create an original sequel to Street Fighter, which became Street Fighter 2, and then they left Final Fight B, the original name Final Fight, and released that as a separate beat-em-up all by itself. So that was pretty cool. It kind of went through a little bit of development, not development hell, but a little bit of development differences between its original release.
I mean, I'll be honest, I think that Capcom, unfortunately, has antagonized fans a bit regarding this because of the fact that they seem to not be able to separate Final Fight from Streets.
Yeah, they've integrated a lot of the Final Fight characters into the Street Fighter universe, and
Right.
I think maybe that was the plan all along, that they were going to exist in the same Capcom universe.
Yeah, which makes sense.
It almost seems like all the games in the Capcom universe kind of exist on the same plane. There's always a lot of character crossover or
Right.
references to other Capcom games.
They did that a lot, especially on the NES. Like, a lot of the manuals and stuff referenced Captain Commando, and like all the characters seem to fit in like the entire universe, like Trojan and Commando, and you know, some of those earlier like NES titles, Strider, Section Z, like they all kind of had that weird Capcom vibe to them.
Yeah, they definitely had their own unique style.
I like that a lot. I mean, is there another company that you can think of that kind of has almost like a Marvel feel to it, where it feels like a universe as opposed to, you know, just a bunch of games?
SNK does for sure. Like, their characters blend into each other all the time, but that's mainly because with King of Fighters, you've got fighting characters from a whole bunch of different fighting games.
Right.
But a lot of what SNK did was based on what Capcom was doing at the time. They were kind of in competition with each other.
Yeah, Konami did it too.
I think that influence was there.
Konami did it with YY World.
Yep.
And the Konami Crazy Racers, that sort of stuff. And
Did
then
YY
also
World have a US release, or is that just Famicom?
just Japan. YY World 1 and 2 only came out for the Famicom.
Yeah, and then the Vic Viper would show up in many other shooters, Parodius,
Parodius.
Twinbee, and all that stuff.
Yep,
So
yep.
there was a lot of blending going on back then.
Yeah.
Some other rumors about Final Fight was that we talked about the movie Streets of Fire and how it directly related to Final Fight. And according to the designers, and I'm saying that we're kind of skeptical on this, but according to the designers, Streets of Fire had nothing to do with Final Fight. It was true that Nishitani would tell his designers to watch 80s movies. He actually had a room set up with a whole bunch of DVDs and VHS tapes of American 80s action movies, and would tell the designers, go take a break, watch some of these movies, let them influence your game.
Right.
He himself said that he was not aware of Streets of Fire at the time and that the movie had nothing to do with the game. But we were talking about this a little bit before we started the show, and Mike, you had some different feelings.
I disagree. I think that maybe he wasn't aware of Streets of Fire, but when you look at all the parallels between Streets of Fire, which did come out around that time, I think it was released in about 86, and the entire Streets of Fire movie, for the most part, has a very Final Fight vibe to it, and also some of the characters. So you've got the main character, Tom Cody.
Yep.
And so they, you know, Cody was the main hero in Final Fight, along with Haggar. The villain in Streets of Fire is literally wearing what, at the end of the movie, is wearing what Haggar wears throughout the entire game.
I thought it was he's wearing what Doug and Red. That he's got that weird, like, they're not really overalls. It's like a shirt that comes like halfway up his torso, and then the weird strap things.
It's a pair of pants with one like belt thing going over his chest. And if you rewatch Streets of Fire, that's what the main villain, played by Willem Dafoe, is wearing. Like it's like this weird like fisherman's thing that like he's not wearing like an exact replica of it or anything. I think it may even have two straps, but it looks like something that inspired the design of Haggar.
Interesting.
In a lot of ways. They're also like,
because you don't want your pants falling down while you're punching and kicking.
Yeah.
It's just not good.
Yeah. And also you got to keep in mind there's the scenes with the biker gang where the bikes get, you know, destroyed. There's a lot of moments in Streets of Fire. In fact, the entire premise. This woman gets kidnapped.
Cody's ex-girlfriend gets kidnapped.
Cody's ex-girlfriend gets kidnapped, and, you know, he's got to go in to rescue her from the gang.
Yeah.
It's like pretty much Streets of Fire. So, like, I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm just saying that I think he doesn't know how well his staff was inspired.
Right, I think that's kind of what we settled on, is that maybe his staff watched this movie and Nishitani didn't watch the movie, and so they added a lot of that inspiration into the game.
Yeah.
And Nishitani just thought that they were original ideas, when in
Right.
fact the artists and the other designers were kind of taking inspiration from Streets of Fire. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
All this is to say, if you haven't seen Streets of Fire, do yourself a favor, because it is
Yes.
it's a wild trip that don't quit. I would highly
Yeah.
recommend it.
If you like 80s movies and you like music by like Meatloaf, all the music
It's
is
weird
great.
because it's got like a 50s vibe, but with
Yeah.
80s aesthetic
Yeah.
to it. It's kind of like an anachronistic kind of a movie. It's,
Yeah.
So the one last rumor that is supposedly dispelled is that they asked Nishitani if the boss enemy Andore was inspired from Andre the Giant.
You
And
said that so professionally, Andore.
and Nishitani says that no, Andore was not based on Andre the Giant, but he had a friend named Andre who was really tall.
I really
I don't know. I mean, that similarity is just way too. Like you said with Streets of Fire. I mean, the similarities, like that's Andre the Giant. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
I didn't even have to see his name to say, oh, that's Andre the Giant. on the
Either
screen.
that or it's like Joe and Mac, but like completely transformed and like mutated. Like it looks like Joe and Mac's face on like Andre the Giant's body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Either that or he has a friend named Andre who wears like
just
pink,
wants to be Andre
pink
the
and
Giant.
red like leopard print.
Yep, and has big curly hair.
And he
Feet
has
tall.
yeah, and he's a Japanese guy. Every one of his relatives looks exactly like him, but just wears different colors.
Yeah. So who knows?
I like to imagine him kind of having a. Is Lenny the big guy from Mice and Men?
Mice and Men. Of
Yeah.
Mice
Yeah,
and Men,
and like he's really just trying to chest bump you. Like he's just excited, and when he grabs you by the neck, he's just trying to pet you because you're a cute bunny, and like
He does kind of make a friendly sound. He's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I'd like to return to the fact that you said Andore.
Andore. That's how you would say it in Japanese.
Oh, okay. I always called him Andor.
Well, it's Andore.
No, it's Andor.
You can call him Andor,
He just
whatever
sounds
you want.
like kind of doofy, like Andor. Like, and even in the games, like later on.
Hello,
in the Street
George.
Fighter
Call me
games.
Andor.
Yeah. Call me Andor.
All right, well, let's move on to our next track. What do you say?
Yeah, sure. So I picked Final Fight 2, and this came out on the Super NES in 1993, and this track is Sleep Junk Down. And this is by Yasuaki Fujita, also known as Bun Bun, Mary Yamaguchi, Yuki Iwai, Setsuo Yamamoto, Yuko Takehara, and Tatsuya Nishimura, whose name is labeled as Ani. All right, welcome back. That was Final Fight 2 on the Super NES, the release year of 1993, and the track was Sleep Junk Down.
How dare you?
It's by Yasuaki Fujita, also known as Bun Bun, Mary Yamaguchi, Yuki Iwai, Setsuo Yamamoto, Yuko Takehara, and Tatsuya Nishimura, also known as Annie.
Sleep junk down is when you sleep on your stomach, and sleep junk up is when you sleep on your back. I just wanted to get that out in the open there.
Can you explain that further? Like what do you mean by?
Sleep Junk Down.
Yeah, it's where your junk is pointed.
Oh,
You know.
oh.
Oh, yeah.
So is this I'm definitely not the scholar here, but is Setsuo Yamamoto Mega Man X guy?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of this sound. Yuki Iwai worked on Mega Man X's 2 or X.
X2. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yuki Iwai was on X2.
Okay.
So there's a lot of Mega Man influence on this soundtrack.
You're gonna see a lot of that later on in the throughout the episode, actually. But yeah, these tracks. I mean, we were talking about it in between breaks. Ed and I were. These tracks are very echoey.
Yeah.
And the music, it's not bad, but I always felt like Final Fight 2 soundtrack in particular felt very lacking to me.
For one, there's a hardware switch you can turn on, or it's like a software switch you can turn on. It's a natural function of the SNES. You can turn echo on, and it's like, so it immediately makes everything sound like there's a chorus or a reverb on it.
Right.
And they turned it on really heavy for this soundtrack.
Yeah,
so
they
all
did.
the music sounds like you're listening to it through kind of like a tin can.
Right.
Which, and there are some players out there for like SBC files where you can turn that echo effect off. And so I did that with this song just to see what it sounds like, you know, without that echo effect. And it sounds, like you said, it sounds really anemic. It sounds like
Right.
the instruments aren't that great.
Yeah.
I think they turned it on because they realized they didn't have a very good instrument set and they wanted it to sound a little beefier.
Why didn't they just make, the instruments sound like
Maybe
similar to
memory,
Final Fight 1?
memory constraints? I have no
Really?
idea. Yeah.
Why didn't they just make this better? You know?
That sounds like a Beavis and Butthead remark. Why didn't they just make it better?
Why don't they just make it better? You said sleep junk down.
Arrangement aside, I do like this track. I like the melody. I like that really heavy kind of percussion.
This is very Prince.
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
especially
yeah.
when like the keyboard comes in and it's like da-na-na, and then it kicks into the next groove. Like it really reminded me of something that Prince would do.
Yeah, what's your impression on this particular track, Cam?
I mean, yeah, Prince is an interesting way to look at it. It's I can hear like heavy Prince maybe,
Heavy Prince.
but like
Heavy Prince.
That's like Elvis's comeback, It's
Right,
just he's
right.
much heavier now.
Yeah.
I do remember this one being my favorite from this soundtrack. I have listened to it a couple of times, and it's not really made an impression on me, much like the game.
Yeah.
It's cool, but there's just some weird choices going on with like the turns and the melody and chord structure. It's like it'll be going and you're kind of getting into the groove, and then it'll go off in some weird direction. And it's sort of jazz fusion-y in that regard, I think. And
Yeah, I get that too.
I don't know. I feel like it just doesn't quite work, and it also doesn't feel in keeping with the original feel of Final Fight. Like the sound, you were talking about the instrument set. Like it's just so completely different than the original game. And I'm not saying they should have reused it, but it just doesn't have that same muscle and like again punchiness. I guess that's a super duper pun, but it just doesn't feel quite right. Even though I can appreciate it on some level, it's not really my thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the complaints that you have, I think a lot of that has to do with the composers they chose for the game. I mean, the original game had like Manami Matsumae, Junko Tamiya, a lot of these really classic Capcom composers, Isao Abe, guys that did really kind of like tough music, like kind of stuff that I think should be in Final Fight. A lot of the composers they chose, Mari Yamaguchi, Yuki Iwai, Setsuo Yamamoto, they're all like Mega Man composers, or like very kind of like, they're people that compose like very slick and groovy music, and it didn't really fit the feel of what Final Fight should be based on the first game.
Yeah. Right.
They kind of went back to a little bit more tough music for the third iteration,
Right.
but this game in particular like is probably my least favorite Final Fight of the three SNES
Same
games, soundtrack and gameplay included.
Yeah, I don't mind the gameplay in this one. I like the gameplay itself, and I like the characters and everything. I mean, the Mad Gear return, just to kind of touch on the game story and the characters. Mad Gear's back, and now they're under a worldwide scale, under someone named Retu's leadership.
Yeah, Retu.
Or Retu? Retu.
Retu Brute.
So essentially, they wanted to take revenge against Guy, who was from the first game.
Which is ironic, considering SNES players would never even know who he was.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. This is an SNES only title, so why even include Guy?
I know. So the Mad Gear gang starts by kidnapping two characters, Gen Ryusai and Rina, who is this character Maki's father and sister. I guess they did it just to kind of introduce Maki.
Rina was Guy's fiance, and Genryusai was Guy's sensei.
Right.
So there's that relationship there.
And he was off training, which is funny because it's like he's off training without his
Who knows, man?
his
Maybe
sensei?
he's got like a kung fu conference.
Maybe
or
it's
something.
like Ryu, where he just like Ryu from Street Fighter, where he just goes under like a waterfall and just yells.
Yeah, he just
Or like-
he just combo punches buses or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
Oh, my bus.
So Maki enlists the help of Haggar and also Carlos Miyamoto, who I'm not really too sure about him, but the three of them go from place to place all across the world. So they kind of take it from Metro City all the way to like, they're going to like China and like New York, or, they're jumping all over the map globally to try to look for Maki's family and try to save them.
And simultaneously taking down all of the international satellites of the Mad Gear. Like they've grown international. They've gone from Metro City to the world, I guess, in the course of 2 years.
Belger was holding them back. Like,
I guess so.
right.
Retu's just got his sights much higher than Belger and his little skyscrapers. So, a little bit about the characters. So Carlos Miyamoto grew up in South America, studying different types of martial arts. He moved to Metro City for some reason to finish his studies, and so he and Mike Haggar kind of became pals.
BFFs.
Yeah, like Carlos was living with Mike Haggar, I guess, for a little while. And although he knows a lot of different martial arts, he likes his katana.
Right.
So his last name is Miyamoto, based on Masume Miyamoto, the famous katana designer, which is why they gave him that last name.
Yep.
So Maki, we already mentioned, was a daughter of Genryusai and Rina, and so she's a member of the Bushin clan, which is the clan that Guy belongs to, his ninja clan or kung fu clan or whatever you want to call him.
Well, she's the younger sister. Rina's her, what is it? Rina's her younger sister?
Rina is Maki's
Younger sister.
No, Maki is Rina's younger sister.
Right.
But she's also in this Bujin.
see, this is the problem. When you start, like, it's Haggar's daughter and Cody's girlfriend. Like, just keep it simple. This stuff is confusing.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I guess she used to be a gang member.
Okay.
So she was a member of this motorcycle gang.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah, so she's also got this kind of like tough attitude, but she's also got this honor based on being a member of the Bushin clan and having her father be a sensei and all that stuff. So Maki and Carlos are the two additional fighters that you can control alongside Haggar, which makes the game feel very different.
Yeah, the sprites are also smaller, so that's why I'm kind of looking at the music and I'm like, well, why did they condense the music and make the music sound the way they did and give it that instrumentation when they could have went balls to the wall with the first soundtrack as far as like that instrumentation, because the sprites were so much smaller. Maybe it's because the backgrounds were more detailed?
I think the sprites were smaller because it was probably more of a concession for having a two-player mode than it was for fitting music in, because music doesn't take very much sound at all.
True.
The SPC processor is completely different from the game processor, so it doesn't take any extra power away from the game when you have better samples. So I think the size of the sprites and maybe some of the less active animation in the game was more because you have two players at the same time rather than just they want to. I guess Final Fight was one player because they wanted to make it look as accurate to the arcade game as they possibly could.
Right. Yeah. I'd also like to add that, to further complicate the whole Street Fighter and, Final Fight, mix up as far as like which one, was it a sequel, wasn't it a sequel, etc. They added Street Fighter characters in the backgrounds.
There's Guile places and
like Chun-Li is like just eating noodles somewhere.
Yep.
Like,
You think she would help?
Yeah, I know, right? Like you think she would be like, oh, I should probably stop this.
Just like a random spinning bird kick. Just
Right.
Didn't go back to her noodles.
The Mad Gear is creating trouble in my city. I should probably do that. My super duper kick moves and get rid of them.
But first, noodles.
She's too busy eating noodles, man.
Exactly.
Ain't nobody got time for that. All right, let's move on to your next track, Cam. What do you got for us?
Oh boy. This one was new to me. It's from Saturday Night Slam Masters, a.k.a. Muscle Bomber, the Body Explosion. This is
That's what happens when you sleep drunk up.
Oh gosh. This is Mike Haggar's theme. It was composed by Masaki Izutani, Toshio Kajino, our buddy, Syun Nishigaki, Ryu Mizutsuki, and Nobuhiro Ōuchi.
Ouchie.
Let's give it a listen.
right, that was Mike Haggar's theme from Saturday Night Slam Masters, also known as Muscle Bobber, The Body Explosion. From the arcade version, came out in 1993, composed by Masaki Izutani, Toshio Kajino, Syun Nishigaki, Ryo Mizutsuki, and Nobuhiro Ōuchi. And the first time I listened to this, just that first dun 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 that came in, I was like, this is Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. It sounds so much like that. And after having done a whole episode on that game, I was really familiar with that music. I went to go look at the composers behind Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
Yep.
Isayo Abe, Syun Nishigaki, Ryo Mizutsuki, Toshio Kajino, and Nobuhiro Ōuchi. So they're all the same composers.
Right, sure.
It makes perfect sense. They're working on the same hardware, the CPS-1 sound system.
1993 was right around that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Release,
That
too.
game came out in 1993 as well.
Yeah.
So they were all probably just creating batches of music for
Right.
video games, and they just kind of picked and choose which one they wanted to go into each game. So
Yeah, that makes
it was really cool. This is almost kind of like a hidden Cadillacs and Dinosaurs track,
Right,
you know?
yeah.
Or vice versa. You know, a lot of the Cadillacs and Dinosaurs track might have been earmarked for this game, for all
True.
we know.
Yeah.
So what was your reason for picking this particular track, Cam?
I assumed that, I knew that you guys had already done quite a bit of, like, the original Final Fight music and on other episodes. And, you know, even when we did Tough Tunes, I was like, I know we already played a version of Bay Area, but I'm going to play it again, you know? So I was trying to branch out a little bit and get into that, like, extended universe or whatever as far as Capcom went. And I never played Saturday Night Slam Masters, but I'm aware of it. And I knew that Mike Haggar was in it, and I was like, surely he's got to have a theme, and sure enough, there it was. And this is, it's pretty good. I like it. You mentioned Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. When I was listening to these other themes, you know, some of them are legitimate remixes, but this one I was, like, listening to it, trying to think, I wonder if they've got any hints of, like, Final Fight music in here. The closest thing I can think of is Biker Gang or something. In the last section of the Bay Area, it's that music that's like, da-na-na,
Oh, yeah.
I think it's pretty unlikely that that's the case because, like you're saying, it sounds a lot like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, and it's the same
Right.
composers. But there's like a little flavor in that if you want to, like, you know, if it's possible to squint your ears. You squint your ears a little bit and imagine.
Turn your head sideways, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Then maybe you can pretend that that's where the inspiration for this track came from. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and maybe that's why they chose this track to be Mike Haggar's theme, is because the people behind, you know, the sound directors kind of looked at this music and was like, yeah, that kind of feels like Final Fight a little bit, and so they threw it in there for him.
I think it does.
Makes sense. So, just to kind of give a little backstory to Mike Haggar, he's a wrestler, becomes a mayor for Metro City.
Naturally.
His fighting style is interesting. He's of Scottish descent, and
Really?
he's classically trained in Scottish backhold folk wrestling.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know, if you notice in like certain like games that have Mike Haggar in it, he has a Scottish flag hanging up in his gym. I think that's
really?
going to be Final Fight Streetwise.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe so.
I didn't notice it in that game,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Immediate way to make Final Fight an even better game is to have put Mike Haggar in a kilt. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. Yeah, so he's been in a bunch of Capcom versus games. He was also in Namco X Capcom. Been in the SNK versus Capcom Card Fighters Clash title, and you know, some of the Marvel vs. games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which recently came out. He wasn't the first character to appear in a Versus game or in a Street Fighter game, though. That, I believe, was Guy. I believe he was in Alpha.
Guy was definitely an alpha. Yeah. He was the first and only Final Fight character in that game.
Yeah.
And they started adding in Cody.
Then they started adding in like Cody and
Wasn't Sodom in Street Fighter out, or was that Alpha 2?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Alpha
You're
2.
right. That was Alpha 2.
And Rolento as well.
Rolento, yeah. This crossbreeding that we've been talking about throughout the entire episode kind of, you know, it doesn't surprise me that they would create, you know, a more wrestling type of game. They may have even made the game specifically because they were like, let's put Haggar in.
Yeah. I mean, I think this was probably even like a flashback kind of game where this flashes back to Mike Haggar's original career as a
Right.
wrestler before he even became the mayor
Yep.
of Metro City. So if you want to headcanon it, you could probably go in that direction.
Yeah, and also Saturday Night Slam Masters had two sequels: Muscle Bomber Duo and Ring of Destruction Slam Masters 2.
Yep, both in the arcade.
Yes.
These were really cool games. They kind of played between a cross between a wrestling game and a one-on-one like Street Fighter style game. I think the first one was 2D if I recall, but then the other ones had more of a free moving kind of a wrestling ring feel to it. They got a little more wrestler style, but still kind of retained the Street Fighter style moves. Yeah. But I had this one on the Super Nintendo at my grandparents' house, so we would play it only on the weekends, me and my brother. But it was a lot of fun. You'd see the wrestlers come in, and like all the smoke and like the spotlights and the strobe lights would be going off everywhere, and the guys would run into the ring and they would face off against each other. So it really kind of brought that pageantry of wrestling to that standard kind of Street Fighter style combat, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
I love the box art. I remember seeing that in the rental store all the time and being tempted. Somebody's getting like body slammed or something.
When it comes to Saturday Night Slam Masters, I always looked at it like, oh, that's pretty neat. Haggar's in it. Yeah, but, it's a wrestling game. So I never really was that interested in it. But it's probably, honestly, one of the best wrestling games ever made, at least on the Super NES. So.
Well, not in the traditional wrestling sense. I mean, as a wrestling game, it's really good,
right.
But like as an accurate wrestling game,
oh sure,
like the Fire Pro series,
it's more
are probably
fantastical.
a little more.
Yeah. No, it's more fantasy based.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we should take this time to pick your favorite Final Fight character, at least from the first game.
Oh God.
So what would you say is your main?
I always see. It used to be Cody.
Okay.
I just liked his balance of speed and power, but lately I've been picking Haggar as my favorite. I just like he has a few more varieties of moves and throws. I like that he can grab an enemy and walk around so that you can get to where a whole bunch of enemies are and then just throw them and knock them all over.
Like grab
or jump into the spinning pile drivers.
No, just jump.
Just jump up and down.
Just jump up and down while holding the
But like you're shaking them.
Yeah.
Let's go on a ride.
Give me your lunch money. What about you, Cam?
Oh, I definitely mained Cody for sure.
Yeah.
I love that you can stop pretty much anything you need to stop with those punches.
Yeah.
And
you can punch knives out of the air. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've lost my thumb power apparently because when I've played it lately, I can't do it quite as well. But when I was a kid, man, I could just do that turbo on the Y button like forever.
Yeah.
I never feel it. So yeah, I was stopping everybody except Katana. Because I don't think you have to like jump kick Katana if you want him to stop, but everybody else, all the Andores and the fat guys and everything, like Cody's awesome.
No, I'm with you. Cody is my pick as well. I always played as Cody. I like playing as Haggar, but I always felt like Haggar was way weaker, like defense-wise. So Cody felt a little bit more balanced, where I always felt like I could go a little bit further with him, at least in the Super NES version. But then when I play as Haggar, like I feel like it's more fun to play as Haggar, but because I couldn't get far enough in the game to beat the game with just Haggar, I would always just play as Cody.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Oh, interesting side note. Like I think the only way I've ever beaten Final Fight on any difficulty level is by playing as Cody up until Bay Area, then dying at Abigail, then playing as Haggar, then switching back to Cody for the final.
Oh, interesting.
For the last
neat.
level.
Okay. I never even thought about doing that, like playing to strengths depending on who you're fighting. Yeah.
I would kind of echo that as well. I would usually switch to Haggar on that Bay Area on that level because it's just so brutal. You're really running the gauntlet. So
yeah.
Let's move on to our next game. This is actually my pick. We haven't even gotten to Ed's picks yet. This is Mighty Final Fight on the NES. This came out in 1993. The track is Round 4, also known as the Factory Level, and it's by Setsuo Yamamoto and Yuko Takehara. And Mega Man fans will want to pay attention to this one because it is a Mega Man track.
Mega great!
welcome back. That was Mighty
Mega Man.
Mighty Final Fight for the NES came out in 1993. The track is Round 4 Factory by Setsuo Yamamoto and Yuko Takehara. That track, to me, is a holdover from Mega Man 6, which came out right around that time.
Okay.
Just to me, personally, I feel like...
Same composers?
Same composers. So Yuko Takehara worked on Mega Man 6 in 93, Mega Man X in 93, and of course Mighty Final Fight, Final Fight 2, Disney's Aladdin, Mega Man 2 The Power Fighters, Star Gladiator, Vampire Chronicle for Matching Service in 2000, just a couple titles. His final game that he worked on was Mega Man 10 in 2010, and he was the composer, or one of the many composers on that one.
Okay.
So, and then Setsuo Yamamoto, of course, we've talked about before, Mega Man X.
Our Mega Man X episode was basically a feature.
Right.
Yeah, on Setsuo Yamamoto. Yeah. To me, though, this track is totally Yuko Takehara. I don't think Setsuo Yamamoto really probably wrote this one. This is right out of Mega Man 6.
Yeah, this has more of like a jazzy or a bluesy feel, and Yamamoto's stuff seems more of like hard rock, metal kind of stuff.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I revisited this recently, and I was going to pick a track, but then Mike picked one, and I was like, well, we don't need a bunch of them. Yeah, it's just straight up. Like, I was trying to think, like, why doesn't this quite seem right for Final Fight? And it's because it's right for Mega Man.
Yeah, exactly.
And then so Mighty Final Fight is like a chibi version of Final Fight, so it does kind of, I guess, fit a little bit. It has more of a cartoony quality to it. I rented this. I think that's the only time I've ever played this game. I rented it when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
I was like, I already had a Super Nintendo. This was a really late release for the NES.
Yeah,
the Super Nintendo was already out, obviously, for at least 2 years.
Yep.
And so I rented it, and I thought it was okay, but I think I was so into 16-bit at that point that going back to NES games were like,
really?
this feels too old,
Huh.
I didn't really get into it that much, and I didn't really have any interest in it after I returned it.
Interesting.
And then I sold my Nintendo off, so I was couldn't even play it anyway.
So I didn't know about this game until probably, I'm going to say high school, and I remember downloading an emulator and playing it on like Nesticle, and I really loved this one, and I loved the music on it, but I never really thought to track a copy down, which is a real shame, because the game now is like a $300 game if you get it on the NES, or if you there was a port on the Game Boy Advance, which was part of the Capcom Classic Mini Collection, which was a compilation of the NES ports of Bionic Commando and Strider. So you can get it there.
It's a pretty good collection.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's fairly cheap, and it's, aside from using an emulator or a ROM, it's the cheapest way to probably get the game.
Yeah.
That or the 3DS Virtual Console release, or the Wii U Virtual Console release.
Okay, so you don't have to spend $200 to $300 to play it. You got a lot of different options out there. That's
but
cool.
You could also buy the Famicom cart, which is way cheaper. It's like a $30 cart.
Oh, that's cool too.
If you really don't need to know what the story is. But, the story is a little different this time around. It is considered a spin-off from the main series, and the game is kind of told with like a more comical style of writing. Like, I love how when you go up to a boss, you could pick as Cody, Guy, or Haggar. So all three are included in this version of the game.
About time.
Yeah, right. And what's really funny to me is that when you approach a boss after you beat the level, the boss kind of like starts asking you questions. So he'll be like, do you want to join the Mad Gear Gang? And then you'll be like, no. And then he'll be like, wah!
How dare you?
Yeah. And then he'll be like, I'm the baddest guy of all, or whatever. And then you'll be like, no, you're not. And then he's like, wah! So it's just like...
This is how band auditions went for us, by the way.
Oh, really? You were like, you should join the Mad Gear Gang. And then like, there'd be a guy...
If they say no or yes, you still beat them up. I mean, it's just kind of part
You still say, wah!
It's their initiation.
Yeah.
Giant teardrops.
I thought that was funny. The style is more like chibi, like super deformed, cartoony, and cutesy looking. So I thought it was kind of cool, the way that the visuals were.
Yeah, and it was kind of like an RPG style feel to the game too, where you earn experience points to get new moves and stuff. It had like kind of a Final Fight mixed with River City Ransom kind of feel.
A little bit.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I had never played this game until like a week ago, and I was like, well, I can feel okay downloading the ROM for research purposes. So I played like through the first couple of levels. It definitely feels like River City Ransom. Like looks, feels, it's a very similar game.
See, I prefer this to River City Ransom just because, I don't know, I never really got into River City Ransom. I don't know what it is about that series. I love Mighty Final Fight. It's one of the best beat 'em ups on the NES in my opinion.
Cool.
So the plot was, instead of kidnapping Jessica for like political or monetary leverage against Haggar, Belger instead kidnaps her because he wants to marry her.
Oh, so he pulls a Bowser.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
He just wants love. This is what
He
all
just
the
wants
villain's
love.
real problem is.
Right.
Somebody should tell him that you can't become ruler of the city by marrying Mary's daughter. Marrying the mayor's daughter? You can't marry into mayorship. I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way. It's not Game of Thrones.
No. The game has 5 stages and 2 bonus rounds where you have to destroy barrels, and it's just good. It's a great game. It's a lot of fun.
I'll have to recheck it out. I haven't played it in quite a while.
No, it's a lot of fun. It's very simplistic and it's very easy. I played it a little bit last night. I booted it up on my EverDrive on the NES, and it is actually pretty easy. And I got to the final stage within like, I'd say a half an hour. You know what I mean?
Cool.
So like, and I couldn't beat it just because the last level is kind of a grind. But it's a pretty easy game and it's a lot of fun. So if you've got like an hour or so, check it out.
Neat.
Yeah, and the soundtrack is great.
Cool. So one thing I did want to mention as we go into the next track is that, so Final Fight 2 was released in 1993, as was Saturday Night Slam Masters, as was Mighty Final Fight, as was the next game on our list.
Yes.
So 1993 was like really the year of Final Fight for Capcom. They put out like 3 or 4 different releases that were related to Final Fight in some capacity. So what's our next track coming up?
Yeah, our next track is one of my final picks. It's from Final Fight CD, and this came out in 1993 for the Sega CD. And this track is West Side Ondor Cage Fight and Stage Ending, and it's by T's Music. So let's, I don't know.
CD it up.
CD it up. There you go. All right, welcome back. That was
Boy, was it.
Final Fight CD. Sega CD release, 1993 was the year. West Side Ondor Cage Fight and Stage Ending, and it was by Tease Music. And I think that's all I got to say about that track is...
I think I mentioned while we were listening to it that it sounds like, the guy from Daytona, USA, if he stuffed his mouth full of jalapeno peppers.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a soft spot for this music. I really dig the Sega CD soundtrack for what they tried to do. It's all rearranged music done by Tease Music, specifically for the Sega CD version of Final Fight. This was developed and published by Sega. There were a lot of things that they did with this version of the game that kind of made it a return to form for the original arcade version. They kind of fixed some of the censored stuff that was in the Super NES version. They put Poison and Roxy back in, but they made the skirt sizes longer. The opening cutscenes a little different. The dialogue's different. They tried to make it more in tune or more in line with the arcade version. They added the industrial level back in. You get to fight Rolento, so...
It's basically an answer to all the SNES stuff that was cut out. They're like,
Yeah.
this is the stuff we can do with the Sega CD. You guys
Exactly.
better buy this one instead.
Yeah, and I do think content-wise that this is a better game. It also has some additional modes, I think, as well. Not like, you could do 2-player, of course,
Yep.
which is a first for the series aside from the arcade version, which is really cool. But I don't know. I feel like the biggest complaint that I have is the music. Because it's on a CD, when the track finishes playing, you get this like quiet, like low, like the music completely cuts out, and then it kind of builds back up slowly.
Yeah, you get this pause.
Yeah, like it fades in.
Cuts the drama a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
you can't
does.
really do that. I mean, so the Sega CD was new at that point, so
Right.
they were just kind of trying to figure out how to loop music on a CD, even in Sonic CD. I mean, it would do that, and it's just
Right.
kind of the limitation of the hardware.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just, an unfortunate side effect of the fact that, it's a CD quality track, but...
Yeah. So, Cam, what's your opinion on this tune?
I did. Well, okay, I like it, especially when we get to the little doodly doodly doo.
Like the bass licks?
Yeah,
like,
but
those bass licks are awesome.
Yeah, again, very 90s, like just taking me straight back to childhood, and it's like silly in a good way. When the vocals come in, I'm like, okay, that's crossing the line for me. But it is funny, and I do get a kick out of it. I'm gonna be honest though, it's hard to imagine like kicking ass to this.
Right, I have the exact same opinion.
It's a little like driving while reminiscing about how many people you beat up.
Like a fun montage of Final Fight.
Okay.
Exactly. To me, it's not very tough, but I do kind of dig it. It's fun and groovy.
Have you neither of you played this?
Oh, I've played this
I was going to say.
over and over again.
Right.
I own the game, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of disagree. I do think that you can play the game to this music. I think it definitely, when the singing comes in, it kind of like wakes you up a little bit, because the entire soundtrack up to that point doesn't really have any vocals, and then you get to this track and you're like, what? It just kind of comes out of nowhere, so it just kind of catches you off guard. But if you look at it from the aesthetic and from the perspective of the fact that this is supposed to take place in like the 80s, then it kind of makes sense, because like you could be walking, around, and this music comes on, and you start fighting. So that's always, I don't know, that's the way I always look at it personally.
Okay.
True. As far as Tease Music goes, I mean, those are the guys that were behind like Thunder Force, Lightning Force.
Really?
All of those crazy metal Sega CD and TurboGrafx CD soundtracks. Some of the games that Tease Music did soundtracks for, you can find the actual credit names, but I haven't been able to find them anywhere on the web for this one, unfortunately. I can talk to Brian. I know he's got some contacts in Tease Music that maybe we can get some actual composer credits for this game when we put the liner notes up.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, if you look up the composer list of all the people that were associated with Tease Music,
It's like 20 of them.
There's like 20 or 30 people.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty huge list. We're not going to go over it. Some of the games that they've done, like Outrun for the Genesis, Flicky, Bonk's Adventure for the Game Boy, Felix the Cat on the NES and the Game Boy. I don't know. They've done a lot of stuff for the most part, but they're kind of like the rogue music group.
VGM mercenaries.
Like we were talking the other episode, I think it was last episode, about like Sega Sound Team and or it was the 100th episode. We were talking about like Sega Sound Team and
like Zuntata and all those guys.
And that stuff. So T's Music is like the unofficial like group that it wasn't really a part of one company. It was just T's Music.
Exactly.
It was a third party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Going back to something you said earlier, and this may be a really ignorant-sounding question, but you're saying there's an arranged version of the Lightning Force soundtrack?
No, T's Music actually wrote the original soundtrack for Lightning Force.
Okay. Well, that still makes me love them, because I wasn't aware of that, so that's cool.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic music in that game.
No, definitely. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next game. We're going to get out of 1993. We're going to move into 1990.
Wait, hold on. I just realized I made a mistake. Not Lightning Force. I'm thinking of Lords of Thunder.
Lords of Thunder.
Lords of Thunder.
I could see how
Lightning Force was
that's their weather
not
related.
T's Music. Yes.
They're both weather related.
I was like, you're telling me there's an arranged version of Lightning Force.
I was thinking with Thunder Force, Lords of Thunder, Lightning Force.
There should just be a game that's called like...
It's Gate of Thunder and Lords of Thunder were the ones that T's Music did.
There just needs to be a shmup called Thunder Lightning.
Lightning Thunder.
Lightning Thunder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thunder of Lightning.
Thunder of Lightning.
Perfect.
There you go.
That was like instant clarification corner. I like that.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So sorry about that.
We're new and improved on this on this second generation of PixelTunes Radio.
Yeah.
Faster processing speed.
We have blast processing. All right, so let's jump into 1995. This is another Cam track that he picked. What do you got for us?
This is from Final Fight 3 for the Super Nintendo, as you might imagine. This is titled For Metro City. It was composed by Yuki Iwai and Yuko Takehara.
All right, let's rock out.
right, that was For Metro City from Final Fight 3 for the Super Nintendo, composed by Yuki Iwai and Yuko Takehara.
And Crying Babies.
And Little Crying Babies. It's a Little Crying Baby remix.
Yeah, that actually works out pretty well. It's like a wicka wicka wah.
I definitely rented this one and Final Fight 2, and I feel like both of the games I just breezed through. Like, I have no lingering memories of them being particularly difficult. Mm-hmm. And granted, I may have just put it on easy and just blown through it, in a couple days or whatever, but I remember almost nothing about the game. I've replayed it recently, and it is pretty good. And at least on paper, it's the best Final Fight game because it's got the most features, got a lot of good playable characters. And is this one co-op or not, do you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've played it recently, and it holds up. It's pretty neat. It definitely feels more like Streets of Rage than the original Final Fight, but I don't think
Agreed.
that I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it works.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that earlier. I think Streets of Rage was so much more advanced than the original Final Fight, and it kind of capitalized on all these extra moves that a lot of people would bring up in conversations, and they'd be like, oh, well, Final Fight can't do this.
Yeah.
You can do this in Streets of Rage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, Capcom was definitely listening to fans at that point, and
Yeah, and I think also because by this point Street Fighter 2 had taken off.
Yeah.
And so, like, even in Mega Man X, like, Capcom was putting Street Fighter 2-esque moves in literally everything, Hadoukens and stuff like that. So you get a lot of those quarter circle toward and half circle style special moves in Final Fight 3 as well.
Mutant Apocalypse, like we mentioned last time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the X-Men had Street Fighter style moves, so...
Right.
I think that kind of makes this gameplay-wise probably my favorite Super Nintendo Final Fight, even though just from a nostalgia and aesthetic and character standpoint, I really think that the first Final Fight takes that award. So it's kind of like having two favorite kids, but, you'll
one is way better
you'll love them
at
for
combos.
different reasons. Yeah, exactly. Like, one's kind of like ugly but really smart, and the other one's like, really suave and charming but kind of dumb. So
Right.
kind of like you just love them differently. That's all.
Gotcha.
But I
Good to know that's how. That's
Hi, kids.
when I want to play, I didn't say they were my kids necessarily.
Right. Sorry.
Wink, wink. But I think when I want to play a really good beat 'em up on the SNES, this is one of the games that I choose a lot. And I've played through this game multiple times. There are branching paths that you can take, so you can get different endings. There are a couple different things you can do throughout the game. There's, like I said, there's a special move meter, so you can pull off like extra special attacks that are really cool looking sometimes, and they'll destroy like everybody on the screen at once. So there's a lot of variety, a lot of different depth style moves that you can pull off in this game that makes it a lot of fun and not just hitting the punch button over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's a shame that Capcom never really capitalized on making another sequel. I would imagine that because this was such a late release for the Super Nintendo that, they didn't want to make a Final Fight 4, technically speaking, so they didn't stick with that beat 'em up, because I really think they nailed the formula with this game. Similar to Cam's experience, I rented both Final Fight 2 and 3 back in the day. I liked 2, I thought it was good, but I thought that they went in a different direction with 3 that was better for the series and would make it longer lasting, but at the same time, I kind of felt like there was a little bit too much story in 3. Like, I feel like 2 really didn't have that much story. It was more like the first game where it was like there was an intro cutscene and there was an outro.
I don't think I've ever had a complaint about too much story in a game.
No.
It's one of my favorite parts of a game, so...
Yeah, I think it's cool. I just think it's different that they went in this aspect of, maybe bumping up story a little bit more than the earlier games.
Yeah. And they also, in this game, kind of made... more Street Fighter references.
Yeah.
Because now you've got two different characters. You've got Dean and Lucia Morgan. Dean was a former Street Fighter, so he was in the Street Fighter circuit. Mm-hmm. So then he ends up wanting to help out, the storyline in Final Fight 3. So I think that's where you get a lot of these Street Fighter style moves. It's almost like playing as a Street Fighter that never existed in a Final Fight game. So
right. So you can play as Haggar and Guy. They both return to the game, and Lucia Morgan is a detective in the Metro City Special Crimes Unit, and so she kind of joins up with these other characters to defeat.
The crimes were quite special.
They were.
Yes.
They were.
So she joins up with everybody else to take on a new gang called the Skullcross Gang, and I guess she apparently owes Mike Haggar a favor for helping her fix some not so...
She was accused of corruption in the police force.
Right.
And so the mayor helped clear her name of those crimes. So she kind of owes him a favor. So that's why she's helping him fight in this game.
Right. And she is a friend of Cody's, so you do kind of get Cody in there at some point or in some aspect.
Yep.
And then Dean is, as we said, previous Street Fighter. The Skullcross Gang took over the Mad Gear Gang's territories, and then they tried to recruit Dean as a member. And when Dean declined, the gang murdered his family.
Yep, that's the Mad Gear for you.
That's pretty harsh. So Dean obviously is carrying both literally and figuratively a totem pole of revenge by carrying around a picture of his family wherever he goes.
Yep, exactly.
He's a man with nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That is pretty much the series finale.
We've got to mention the cringy reimagining of Haggar with the ponytail.
Oh, with the ponytail?
The swooping ponytail in some of those cutscenes. And I don't know if he had knee pads in the second one, but they're very prominent in the third one.
I'm almost positive he did. You know, he was also getting older. He's a retired wrestler.
Got to protect those aging shins, man.
Yeah.
Maybe he's got osteoporosis and he's worried about breaking limbs. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I think in the second game he also had a ponytail, if I recall.
Maybe.
I think so.
I know at least the third one. It's
Definitely
like
the third
it's
one.
like Ken Street Fighter Alpha style, like long, like down past his butt. It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Pretty funny. Yeah.
You just want to yank it and just pull him right over, you know?
Yeah, it just definitely doesn't seem like the best strategic idea. I don't know. I can see shin guards, but the ponytail maybe would kind of slow you down a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as the music goes, Cam, why did you pick this particular track from the game?
This track is pretty cool, I think. It's very shreddy. It's very J-Fusion, like T-Square or something like that, because you've got that main theme, the dun 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 dun, and it always goes back to that, but then with these intermittent solos, so it feels very fusion-y in that regard, because you've got kind of a highlight, first with the bass player, then with the keys, then with like kind of a melodica type voice, and it's like it's featuring band members,
Yeah, for sure. It's got more of a live band feel to it. And I think even though the instrument set is kind of similar to what they used on Final Fight 2, I think the composition feels more beat 'em up. It feels a little more tough, a little more aggressive than a lot of the smoother rock and roll style stuff that was in Final Fight 2.
It felt more like Mega Man X, which is what I appreciated.
Yeah.
I liked that style a lot more. I thought it was a little bit tougher sounding, as we said earlier, and I think it was a much better sound font, if you will, as compared to like Final Fight 2.
Yeah, exactly. And so speaking of tough music from this game, we've got one more track from Final Fight 3, which I picked for a change. Oh my god, I actually get to play a song this episode.
Yeah.
Let's play Law and Disorder, again from Final Fight 3, composed by Yuki Iwai and Yuko Takehara. That was Law and Disorder from Final Fight 3, which came out on the SNES in 1995, composed by Yuki Iwai and Yuko Takehara. A lot of the fight music in Final Fight 3 is like recycled over and over again. You kind of hear the same tracks on like different stages as you go throughout the game. Yeah. So I'm kind of glad that Cam picked For Metro City, because that was my second favorite track from this game. But this was the one that always stood out to me. I really just love the groove for this one. And even though it's about a 30-second loop, like I could just listen to it over and over and over again. This plays probably at least like 5 or 6 times throughout the entire Final Fight 3 game. I love the chunky kind of bass groove that comes in, and then those high like whistly tones. I don't know, they remind me of so you're not a fan of those.
Oh man.
But
you know what it is about those? I don't mind them if they only happen once. But that like the repetition of like
it's funny because
it sounds like a record skip.
One of my favorite tracks of all time on the Genesis is the song Jurassic Dope from Contra Hardcore.
Yes.
And it has the same kind of high-pitched, like West Coast rap style, like from the late 90s, early 2000s. That style, almost like a theremin or something. Yeah. And normally I don't like real music but popular music that has that.
Right.
But when video games do it for some reason, I think it sounds really cool. So, but this is like the essence of tough. Like I think of like
it should have been on Tough Tunes.
I think of like Cam's Mad Gear Band, and I think like a track like this, like guys dressed up in leather with headbands, like rocking out to this kind of music. Is that kind of like the feeling that you get, Cam?
Well, now that you've brought it up, yes. The first thing I thought when I heard this, though, was that somebody was like, hey, we need some Streets of Rage sounding tracks. Because I really hear that groove is very New Jack Swing and very like house sounding, like kind of fast swing kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like an answer to Yuzo Koshiro's music.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And those whistly things sound a little more like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but unnatural. Like they don't sound like an actual instrument. They sound like a lot of the Streets of Rage stuff, which was very electronic-y. I think it's really cool, though, and an interesting kind of, what is it, Super Adventure Island?
There's at least one track on Adventure Island that has that same kind of instrument in it.
Right, so it's interesting to take, something that was definitely popularized on the Genesis hardware and hearing it on the Super Nintendo and how it sounds, and in this case anyway, it sounds really cool. I just think maybe there's more than one way that Streets of Rage influenced this particular game. Obviously we've got the gameplay with the combos and whatnot, but maybe the music to a degree.
For sure. Didn't even think about it like that.
Yeah.
Very true.
I like the track. I love that groove. I hate that noise. And I love squealing guitar. Don't get me wrong. But if a guitar track was like, it sounds like a guitar's having a seizure. Like, I don't know. So that was my only complaint about this track. But otherwise, I love that groove. I also like, it's weird, like, whenever that part came, the really annoying whistle, I was like, all right, don't listen to it. Okay, what's going on in the background? Okay, all right, that's kind of cool. So I had to listen to the rhythm. To get into.
But it's really hard to kind of get around that.
Right, because it's just so like, so.
It was a practice in meditation for you, though.
Yeah,
so your mind is more powerful now.
Yeah, definitely. So, but I dig what was going on in the background with the rhythm at that point when that like high pitched whistle was kind of playing. So
very cool.
It was cool. I dig it. I don't even remember this track, and I really don't remember much of Final Fight 3. I remember the opening cutscene, and I think that's really it. Like I couldn't tell you really much about the game.
Yeah, you should play through it again. I think it's probably a lot better than what you remember.
Oh, I remember it being a good game. I just don't. Like anytime I want to play Final Fight, I always go with the first one. So
yeah. No, understandable.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like Mighty Final Fight in the sense that if you want to play the real thing, good luck, because that cartridge goes for quite a bit. I can't remember how much, but
not as much as you'd think.
Really?
You can get this cart for about $80.
Yeah.
So it's not too terrible. It's kind of dropped in price a little bit because the Virtual Console release. It was like over $100 cart, and I think it's dropped a little bit. People aren't getting as much money for it nowadays. So that's
to save face on my part, I'm going to say I looked up the price like a couple of years ago before that happened. So I'm still right.
Yeah.
He's just right in the past.
It was like a $60 game, and then it jumped, and then it dropped down. So it's kind of bounced back and forth, but. Hopefully all these games drop in value and everybody can buy them.
Right. And if you do want to buy it for that price, you're still going to get a good game for it. It's not like you're going to get a piece of crap for
definitely.
your money.
It's not like, Color a Dinosaur.
Yeah, exactly. God. All right, so let's move on. So now we're kind of moving past the original 3 Final Fight games into games that are either remakes or special guest appearances by Final Fight characters. It's less part of the traditional Final Fight universe. So what is our next game up, Cam?
This is from Street Fighter Alpha 2 for the arcade. This is Guy's theme. And wow, there's a lot of composers, so bear with me. This is Syun Nishigaki, Setsuo Yamamoto, our buddy, Tatsuro Suzuki, Iso Abe, Yuko Takehara, Naoki Iwami, and Naoshi Mizuta.
Alright, that was Street Fighter Alpha 2, the arcade release from 1996. That was Guy's Theme by Syun Nishigaki, Setsuo Yamamoto, Tatsuro Suzuki, Esayo Abe, Yuko Takehara, Naoki Iwami, and Naoshi Mizuta.
I really like this track.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic
This is a rendition of, what's the Slums track?
Slum Alleyway.
Slum Alleyway
Yeah.
from the first game.
And just a nice groovy feel to it. Fantastic music. What would you think of it, Cam? I mean, you picked this, obviously, you like it.
Yeah, again, the Alpha series is not something I'm super familiar with. I'm pretty sure I played the SNES port. I remember renting that, but I didn't remember this theme in particular. But when I was checking some stuff out, again, that's kind of in that extended Final Fight universe, I was like, I know there's remixes for the Street Fighter series, especially when, those Final Fight characters were in Street Fighter. And found this one, and I just thought it was a really neat rendition. And again, it's got a nice little J-Fusion feel to it, and it's very recognizable. Like, I like that to me it hugs to the original just enough, and takes some different ideas with it just enough. Like, it's not too far out there for me to appreciate it, so I really dig it.
The original track was written by Esayo Abe, and you can definitely see the similarities in like that bass line to Sagat's theme from Street Fighter 2. Dun 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 dun. It has that kind of samba meets really progressive, kind of like bizarre time signature feel to it.
Right.
And this track does a lot of time changes all the way through it, and I think whoever arranged it, I'm not sure who the arranger was, but they did a really good job at kind of making it feel like that jazz fusion sound, even though the original didn't have so much that feel to it. It was more like a progressive rock style track.
Kind of like a samba thing, like a like, yeah. I dig this track. I really do enjoy it. This is gonna sound weird, but the fact that it's Guy's theme kind of throws me off. Just because I'm so ingrained with the idea that the only two characters in Final Fight are Cody and Haggar. So it's like, anytime somebody's like, oh, my favorite character's Guy, I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like,
who is that?
Who is that? And I mean, there was a version that came out. It was a Blockbuster exclusive that came out. It was basically the first Final Fight game with some slightly retooled power-ups, and they replaced Cody with Guy, and they called it Final Fight Guy.
Right.
And
that was a retail release on the Super Famicom in
Right.
Japan, but it was a Blockbuster-only rental in the US. Yeah.
Right.
If you're like me, you wish you had rented the game and just kept it and paid the $30 or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's really expensive now.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. But and it's not even worth it because it's just the first game, but you could play as Guy
Unless
instead of Cody.
Guy is your favorite character, in which case you want to play with him.
Yeah.
In which case, you're stupid.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So that's my only gripe, is that to me it'll always be Cody and Haggar, but yeah.
And
that's my.
Well, there's also I can't remember if it's Marvel versus Capcom, but it's another game, a more recent game that Haggar's featured in, and it's again a retooled version of this track, not the original Slum Alleyway.
The original,
track, but
right.
it's Haggar's theme, and like I looked it up on YouTube, and everybody was like, no, this is Guy's theme. And I definitely didn't want to pick that rendition because it was way more like modern-y and electronic-y.
Yeah.
So I wasn't as into it, but apparently Capcom loves recycling this one in particular. So
It's a great theme. It's one of my favorite tracks from
It
the
is.
original Final Fight soundtrack. So
Yeah.
I can listen to renditions of it all day long.
Yep.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
So what do you got for us next, Ed?
Next up is one of everybody's favorite Final Fight titles, Final Fight Revenge. No, that was complete sarcasm. So this is the theme from Damned, who was the first boss from the original Final Fight.
We're going to have to censor that.
This is... Yeah, I know. Naughty language.
I'm thinking Thrasher. Does that work?
Thrasher was his other name. Was that his name in the Final Fight? Yeah. I hardly ever play the SNES version anymore. But anyways, so Thrasher's theme from composer Jim Wallace, and this was a Sega Saturn Japanese exclusive release, came out in the year 2000. right, welcome back. That was Damned, or Thrasher's theme from the game Final Fight Revenge, which came out on the Saturn Japanese exclusive in the year 2000, composed by Jim Wallace. And this is basically like a 3-minute long ringtone from like Samsung.
That's a little too accurate. Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know. I wanted to pick a track from this game because it's a dedicated Final Fight game and it deserves to be in our little chronology. But the soundtrack is really, really not that good. And Damn's theme is like the only one that I felt had any sort of decent instrumentation to it, even though it's incredibly repetitive and uses like sample-based music in a way that nobody should really ever use sample-based music. So the rest of the soundtrack is all really like MIDI, light jazz. The instruments aren't that great. It's not very well composed. Like, Damn's theme is the only one that I guess kind of sticks out for people because it has that kind of heavy percussion. It's more sample instead of MIDI-based. And it starts off great. And then as it goes on, you're kind of like, wait, this is just like sections of 4 stanzas like repeating over and over and over again. And I'm like, okay, like maybe a 30-second loop of this would have been cool, but maybe not the full like minute and a half, 2 minutes that it runs.
Very meandering.
Right.
I feel like this would have been a good track to put in like the menu selection when you're like choosing what you want to do. But like to make this as like a character's theme, no.
Well, granted, the battles in Final Fight Revenge do not last for very long.
Right.
So you're probably not even going to hear this whole thing play all the way through, even through like 2 or 3 rounds of music.
Sure.
The game itself is super blocky. It was the last Sega Saturn game ever released, so and again it was a Japanese exclusive. So
and Capcom's final game released, and it was developed by the American branch of Capcom, but yet it was only released in Japan.
So all in all signs point to a game that's just not that fantastic.
Yeah.
And it was kind of rushed out, I think. I think, Capcom was going to be, focusing on Dreamcast releases going forward, obviously.
Sure.
And they had a huge presence on the Dreamcast too, so they're probably just kind of like trying to shuffle this out the door, slap the Final Fight logo on it, maybe people will buy it or whatever, and then just, forget about it forever. So because of that, the game is still pretty valuable, I think more based on the limited release instead of the actual quality of the game.
Yeah.
The game is very stiff. It's cool to see these characters kind of come to life. So like there's Eddie E from the original game, again Thrasher or Damned. He's kind of like this Jamaican kind of guy. And then Cody and all the characters from Final Fight, all in.
You play as Andor, right?
You can play as Andor too, yeah. So there's a lot of different characters, and it's cool seeing them come to life in a 3D realm and having a little more personality to them. But once you actually start fighting, you're like, I'm not really having much fun with this. Yeah,
so
not a lot of variety there.
I don't think you've already said it. What's the genre of the game? I mean, is it more one-on-one or?
Yeah, it's kind of like a Tekken style fighter.
Yeah, or like Rival Schools.
Yeah,
kind of,
well, Rival Schools is more 2D. This definitely has like a 3D plane aspect to it. You can move back and forth, and then you can basically there are a lot of weapons and items that are kind of like thrown all over the floor. You can bash open crates and stuff. So you have to get these items because the items are super powerful. As soon as you get an item, if you can get off a hit on the other guy, you take like 50 to 75% of their health. But it's kind of hard to get to these items, and it's kind of even harder to use them without getting hit in the process. So it's kind of like a battle to see who can get these items and use them before the other person can.
I mean, it's not like Power Stone in the sense that you get free reign.
It's not 3D free roaming.
Right.
No. But like I said, Rival Schools is more of like a 2D game with polygonal characters.
Right.
This has more of like a 3D aspect to it. Like you can roll forward and backward and stuff like you can in Tekken.
Kind of like a Bushido blade kind of. Sort of.
Yeah. No. More like Tekken.
It's its own special.
Tekken or like Soul Calibur, like that style of game.
Right.
Where you fight on a 2D plane, but you can roll back and forth and dodge in and out of the screen, stuff like that.
Like Dead or Alive, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But as for the music, this is probably the least tough thing I've ever heard.
I know, it's kind of like something you'd hear in a cafe like downtown New York or something like that.
Exactly.
Have you heard the Global Gladiator soundtrack? I mean, intro theme.
That's awesome. So I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Awesome.
But I think you're talking from a Final Fight perspective.
Yeah, and like Mike said, it just sounds like menu music or just hanging out music or something.
Yep.
And even then, it doesn't sound like Damn/Thrasher hanging out. It sounds like my uncle hanging out. So,
Or like, yeah, maybe it belongs in like a Cadillac video with like Matthew McConaughey driving through a night street or something like that.
I particularly did like loathe the what is that? Is that like a duck playing a trumpet?
They are trumpets hanging out in a tree, calling like birds to each other.
Hanging out with Cam's uncle.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
the only thing I like about this is that it extends the mythos that exists only in my head that the Mad Gear band has horns. So other than that, we would never play it because again, it's just very weak and casual and boring. So.
Just like your mom. Oh.
Yeah. Well, those are okay qualities to have in a mom, maybe.
I don't know. Your mom's the one that won't let you play Final Fight.
This is true.
Right. Yes, it was my casual mom that let me play most games. So.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, I concede.
All right, let's move on to my last pick of the day, Final Fight 1 on the Game Boy Advance. This is the 2001 re-release of the title, and this is Double Ondor by Seiko Kobuchi and Toshio Kajino. Welcome back. That was Final Fight 1 on the Game Boy Advance, so the re-release that came out in 2001. The track was Double Ondor. It's also sometimes credited as Mad Gear Gang. It's by Seiko Kobuchi and Toshio Kajino.
Yeah, I think Mad Gear Gang or Mad Gear Gang is a mistake. I think on YouTube there's a track that labels this as Mad Gear Gang, but it's not. Because Mad Gear Gang is the intro, is the name for the intro song to the game. So
it must
probably
be like
just somebody made an error.
Yeah.
This is called Double Ondore in the official soundtrack.
You mean Double Ondor?
Whatever you want to call them.
Ondata Gugu.
So, Cam, have you played this version of the game?
No, I would love to, but I haven't. Yeah, and
It's worth picking up.
Okay, tell me about it, won't you?
Sure. So it is
It's like Final Fight, but in the palm of your hand.
That is absolutely true. So it is the Super NES version brought to the Game Boy Advance. So they kind of added some stuff.
Like Guy.
Yeah, they did. They added Guy. I think they added the industrial level, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything is basically back. And it does have two-player mode through the link cable.
Yeah, the censorship is still there. So Billy and Sid are back instead of Poison and Roxy.
Thank God.
Yeah, so...
And the bonus levels, too, I think, have returned.
Yes, the bonus levels are there.
And there's also, like, cool graphics. There's a little more storyline, so the characters talk to each other when you meet a boss.
Yes.
And there's really cool artwork.
Yeah, the artwork is all, like, Street Fighter Alpha, like, redesigned.
Yeah.
In terms of the cutscenes. So, like, when you get to the boss, you'll have these interactions. It's not like Mighty Final Fight, where they'll be like, am I the coolest guy around? And then you're like, no. And they're like, wow.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be like that in Mighty Final Fight. That's just the whole concept behind it. It's kind of like a parody of those kind of games.
Right. I kind of wish that the series was like that, though. Or like, you meet up with Katana, he's like, I have the coolest swords in the world, right? And then Cody's like, nah. And then he's like, wah.
But yeah, so and the music is all kind of like high energy, like remixes of the original soundtrack. I really like that you picked this one because this is one of my favorite selections from the soundtrack, and it's got this really like breakbeat behind it. It works very, very well with the music. I wish the lead instrument was a little more prominent. It like gets buried behind the bass
like
and the drums.
Like,
yeah, like diddly diddly doo. Like it's all very, very quiet behind these huge percussion and rhythm sections.
Yeah, the percussion's a little overpowering in this one, but it's great. It's I really like this version of this song. Probably, honestly, more so than the Super NES version. I'm gonna say
sacrilege.
How dare you?
I know. I really like the Super NES version, but this was always one of my least favorite tracks. So when I heard this version of it, I picked this up when it came out. on the Game Boy Advance, and I just remember listening to the songs and being like, wow, this is really good.
Oh, it's like the ugly duckling that turned into a swan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the Super NES soundtrack, and while I appreciate what they did with it back then, I felt like this was like a reinvigorated version of that soundtrack.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that.
There's just some tracks in this game, in Final Fight 1, that kind of sound a little bit like, I don't know, muted. Like the instrumentation that Capcom was using on the Game Boy Advance for all their remakes, like Breath of Fire 2 and Breath of Fire, and like they're not bad, they're just different sounding.
Yeah.
And so like if you can't adapt to it, it can at times kind of sound a little like harsh at points, and also at the same time a little muted. Another good example is Mega Man and Bass. If you listen to Mega Man and Bass versus Rockman and Forte, they're like totally different soundtracks in terms of the
Game Boy
harshness.
Advance music hardware was just there's so many problems with it. You know, you've got that difference between the clearer Game Boy Legacy sound channels, plus those really staticky sample channels that the Game Boy Advance had, and then plus the fact that the Game Boy Advance like put this layer of fuzz over everything, like compressed the audio before it came out of the system. It was just bad. But getting like aside from that, Cam, so what did you think of how they remixed this particular track based on the SNES version?
I like, again, along the lines of Guy's theme, I like this reimagining of it. That kind of trashy breakbeat stuff is kind of neat. And the coolest part of the track, the little diddly diddly doo, like that's still in there. It's very prominent.
Diddly diddly doo.
Wheedly diddly. And for my part, it is hard to imagine any version being better than the Super Nintendo version. Especially, I've always loved how much Tom stuff there is in the SNES version. And this one especially, it's very prominent, that beep, 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 beep kind of thing. And just they've got such a distinct tone to them, and it's so neat. But this one is really cool in its own right. I think I kind of get what you guys are saying. I never owned a Game Boy Advance, and I don't not like this kind of chippy sound, but I definitely feel like it gets a little cloudy at times, kind of like with, for instance, like some of the Castlevania.
Like your mom.
Yeah, like my mom. Yeah, the Castlevania soundtracks on the original Game Boy.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you kind of feel like there's too much going on, even though it sounds really neat. I like this a lot, though. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Another cool thing to mention about the Game Boy Advance version of Final Fight 1 is that they introduced a bunch of unlockables, like some harder difficulties, in addition to like some changes in like the one-up system, or like how you can get one-ups. And they also...
Can you actually give Haggar a shirt?
You can change their costumes.
Why would you want to?
No, you can change their costumes. I don't know if Haggar had a change in costume. I think it was just like different colors. So you can, as you like beat the game or like beat the stages or whatever, you unlock different colors. But also for the two characters that were in Street Fighter Alpha games or Street Fighter games, Cody and Guy, they have their unlockable costumes.
Oh, right. You can put his prison uniform on.
You can put Cody's prison.
Yeah,
I never really liked the fact that they put Cody in prison, like
me neither.
Canon style.
Speaking of which, why don't we move on to our next track?
We're gonna explain.
We'll explore that when we talk about this next game. So let's listen to Bar Fight from DJ Default, otherwise known as Brad Foch, Raymond Herrera, and Christian Habenicht. And this is from Final Fight Streetwise, which came out on the PS2 in 2006.
This is Barf-ite?
Barf-ite.
Gotcha.
All right, that was Bar Fight from Final Fight Streetwise. Came out on the PS2 in 2006. Written by Brad Foch, otherwise known as DJ Default, Raymond Herrera, and Christian Habenite.
And Wes Borland of Limp Bizkit.
And Wes Borland and everybody from Limp Bizkit and or the collective that is known as Fear Factory plus Cypress Hill. Yeah, and well, talking about Fear Factory is probably appropriate here because Raymond Herrera is the drummer and founder of Fear Factory. Plus, he's done so much other stuff. He's done a lot of games. He's worked with Brujeria, Assassino, Phobia, Archaea. So he's got music production experience, plus drum experience, plus like remixing and like industrial music experience as well. So he's the main person behind this particular track. DJ Default wrote most of the music for the game, which has a much more hip-hop feel to it. On the game itself, if you look at the files, this particular song file is called Herrera 1. There's Herrera 1 and Herrera 2, so those are the two tracks that he worked on. So this one is called Bar Fight in the actual soundtrack, but it's definitely mostly composed by him. And then Christian Habenite is he's just like a session musician, so he did most of the guitar parts. He's a music producer as well. He's married to a woman named Melinda, and she has her own like singer-songwriter kind of band. And so he plays guitar on all her CDs and stuff too. So
I like to imagine he chugs. It's like chugging on her singer-songwriter stuff.
Right, I know. I haven't heard any of her music, but from her website, it seems mostly like, very whimsical kind of folky stuff.
Right.
But, in the background, there's like da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
It's probably more like, like adult contemporary type stuff.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Exactly. So, but this music...
But all the song lyrics are about Final Fight.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
It's like, baby, you take my heart.
Haggar, come back to me.
Yeah.
You put my heart in a flying pile driver.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Smash me in the face with a steel pipe.
But yeah, this music is everything I loved about early 2000s music. Huge, grindy beats with very chuggy guitars, lots of kind of like hip-hop influence with some nice little breakdowns with like little organ parts, but then it goes right back into that really heavy stuff. A lot of people hated this game. I think I'm maybe one of the only people on the planet that actually enjoyed playing through this one, and the soundtrack definitely
I think you're literally the only person.
Very well may be.
I've never heard anybody say good things about this game.
Here's your plaque.
I'm not gonna... I haven't played it, so I can't diss it. But I will say that from what I've heard and seen and watched online about this game, it is, from what I understand, the developers of this game, who also made Final Fight Revenge, the fighter that we talked about earlier.
Yep.
So they made that game. They made a bunch of other games like Maximo, and also they later on made the Golden Axe Beast Rider, the remake of, or the reboot of Golden Axe. And they seem, from what I read about their experience with Final Fight, they really did try to make an appropriate like Final Fight sequel. To give you an example, Final Fight 7 Sons was a canceled 3D beat-em-up, similar to the older Final Fight games developed by Capcom Studio 8. And this was before Final Fight Streetwise. So I kind of feel like, I'm not sure if that's the same development team, but I know that like it kind of gets confusing because Capcom USA was kind of like all wrapped up with a bunch of different development houses. Yeah.
So, this was the only US-based one, though, I think.
I believe so. So they tried to make a game that was very similar to the Super NES, like beat-em-ups, used a rail cam system, and so the aesthetics were very similar to like the Super NES Final Fight games. And it would have been pretty cool. It got canceled, unfortunately. It was supposed to come out on PS2. The developers were told that, unfortunately, the game would not suit their quote-unquote core audience, and so they ended up making the game more like Grand Theft Auto. So that's really, because Grand Theft Auto was huge back then.
Yeah.
Like Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, those were out around the time. They
Open
were
world 3D
millions.
stuff. Yeah.
So that's kind of how it goes, unfortunately, with video game design, is that a lot of video game developers will just look at what's popular and they'll be like, make more of that, that's going to make money.
Exactly. Clone it.
Right. So they cloned it and basically implemented more Grand Theft Auto style missions and stuff like that in the game. And that's just, it goes so far against the grain of Final Fight that I personally, I don't think I could get into it.
I thought the fighting was okay. I liked the story. The voice acting is not great at all in this game. So
wait. Capcom video games don't have good voice acting?
It's very reminiscent of Resident Evil.
I've never heard of that. Mega Man 8, Resident Evil, no. Fantastic dialogue.
So it actually introduces a new character to the Final Fight universe. So it's Kyle Travers, who is Cody's younger brother. And so this takes place several years after. So, after the events of Final Fight, Cody ends up in prison. And I don't ever know if they actually told us why Cody went to prison.
I can't remember.
Maybe he just bashed in the wrong heads at some point. Yeah. They sued or something. But
and you may get into this later, but the impression I've got, and this is from not having played any of the more modern Final Fight stuff, is that it's like hinted at the end of the original Final Fight where Cody's like, I can't stay with you while there's evil in the streets or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some, I don't know if it's a fan theory or if it's actually backed up by Capcom, but Cody has a problem where he literally cannot stop kicking ass. And I'm assuming
so awesome.
It's it's like what Ed said, and eventually he gets himself in trouble by bashing in the wrong head or something.
It's funny that you mentioned this because so the concept behind this game, the plot behind it, is that Kyle is like going into these Fight Club style fights and Cody is kind of like his ring man.
Yeah.
So he's kind of coaching Kyle through beating up all these guys for money so they can make a living. Cody's knees are bad. He can't fight anymore because he's got like a chronic injury. And so there's this drug that's kind of like permeating the streets around them. And so Cody gets himself in trouble again because he's a dork. And
I don't think that's the right word.
He's just a
silly man.
What a goober.
And Cody the Goober. So he gets himself into drugs because the drugs make his knees feel better so that he can fight again so he can get money to pay back whoever he owes money to or something. So that's the whole concept behind this game, is that Kyle's got to track down the people that have kind of like kidnapped Cody and are now influencing Cody to work for them. And so the concept behind the game is just, it's so dark and gritty that it's almost like a parody of itself. It's it's just absurd in that sense. The gameplay was good. I might have even been on like paternity leave because it was like right after my first son was born, right after Eddie was born, like 2006. He was born at the end of 2005. So he must have been he wasn't even a year old yet. So I think it was just one of those like dad staying at home and playing video games while his kids sleep. So I'm sure, Cam, you kind of know that at this point.
Unfortunately, I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I kind of have memories of this game, based on, I hope it doesn't wake up Eddie because this music is really loud and good.
My impression of the game so far is, and this is granted just from watching reviews, I'm kind of like Mike, and then I can't really say too much about it because I have not played it. But it's like my aversion to it is kind of similar to Castlevania Lords of Shadow or whatever, where I feel like they took, they got this franchise and made it too serious or something. This Final Fight game seems like almost gritty to a fault. Hey, let's take elements of Fight Club and Grand Theft Auto, and I'm getting a definite Max Payne vibe from the whole street drug thing. And just maybe taking that all to an extreme that I don't know, I just didn't feel like existed in the original game. The original game just to me feels like over the top fun, whereas maybe this feels over the top but in an unintentional kind of way.
I can appreciate Lords of Shadow because I didn't put it in the same headspace as I did with the other Castlevania games, and I guess I kind of did the same thing with Final Fight Streetwise. Here are these characters that I'm familiar with from those games, but I never considered it as a sequel to Final Fight 3 or anything like that. It's just kind of its own game by itself.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, as a game in the Final Fight series, it feels like they just made a 3D beat 'em up and then slapped Final Fight in afterwards. Just kind of shoehorned these characters into a game that they already had. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that point.
Gotcha.
Yo, Lords of Shadow is garbage.
Yeah, we know your opinion.
Yeah. Sorry, just wanted to say that. But I don't know. I may give this one a chance one day. I've heard some other songs in the soundtrack. There's a really funny porno theater in the
you
game.
Walk into an adult theater.
You go into an adult theater and it's playing this I had always like wanted to play this track on like a Valentine's Day episode because I think it'd be really goofy, just like a goofy porno style, like, you know, funky 70s music with like moaning in the background. It's really silly.
Well, there's two really good remixes of the original two original Final Fight songs on this, which we played. We didn't play on the show, but that same night that we recorded that Spooky Tunes show at my house when we had Emily and Pernell and everybody over.
Right.
We played a couple of VGM tracks after we did the show, and I played those two, and everybody was really impressed with the quality of those. So maybe I'll put those up as YouTube links on the Facebook group in this thread.
I'd be interested to hear those for sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely post them up. So those are really cool. All right, so ready to get on to our last track of the night?
Yeah, I don't want to end on a bummer because, you know, I love the Final Fight series so much.
But I love this track. It's not a bummer for me.
Well, yeah.
The game might be a bummer to you.
Yeah.
But don't unbum my bumness, or bum my unbumness.
What?
Don't rain on my parade is what I'm trying to say here.
Okay, gotcha.
All right,
what
so
do we got next?
Well, I also, I mean, I was tempted to pick that new Abigail track, and I didn't. So whatever, I don't know that I know this theme coming up, but I guarantee it's not as bad as that. So
No.
Yeah.
No. It's probably a little bit better. This one this one is from Ultra Street Fighter 4. This came out on the arcade, the PS3, the PC, and the Xbox 360 in 2009. This is Cody's theme, remixed by Hideyuki Fukasawa, and I think the original track was called The Mad Gear. It was part of the original theme from Final Fight.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn the beat back.
All right, we're back. That was Cody's theme, remixed from the original version of the track called The Mad Gear from Final Fight. This was in Ultra Street Fighter 4, which came out on the arcade, PS3, PC, Xbox 360 in 2009, arranged by Hideyuki Fukasawa. I like this one. It feels like everything that, like, post, like, 2001, 2006, everything that came out that had any sort of Final Fight influence all now has a hip-hop influence for it for some reason.
Yeah.
Especially in Final Fight Revenge 2, that damned track had a lot of
That
hip-hop
damn
going
track.
for it. That damn track. So,
Whoa.
that's
That
so
Thrasher
damn,
track.
That's so damn track. But this one, I like that it kind of has like a cinematic version of the Final Fight theme going for it, but with these nice sweeping violins and this huge hip-hop beat. It doesn't feel like a fighting game track. Like, it doesn't feel like you could actually fight to this track, but
Right.
I guess because Cody's there and it's got Final Fight melodies in it, they figured it would just work. I don't know, Cam. What'd you think about it?
I like some of the reimagining of the groove. It's like I like the arrangement. Like I like the tempo and everything. but like the hip hop like tone of it is, I'm not as crazy about that, just because it feels, to me, it feels a little phoned in. Like, you know, here's your hip hop playbook, and here's the bass and snare sound and all that kind of stuff.
I really feel like they could have integrated the Final Fight melody into the background music a little bit more, like at least did some chord changes that would match what the lead was, you know, something. It feels like they just played one instrument that had some Final Fight melodies, like over a, like you said, like a stock kind of hip hop beat, like phoned in, I guess, is probably the exact interpretation I had from it too.
Yeah, and some of the little vocal turn the beat back stuff, it's cool at first, and then you're like, okay, I've heard that about 20 times already. So I like the idea of it, but maybe the execution is not quite my taste. So,
agreed. Michael, your opinion?
Same. It's not my bag, but you know, what can I say? I hate everything.
That's true.
Yeah.
According to pixelated audio.
Yes. No, it's just I like hip hop when it's used with real instrumentation, or when they try to make it more artistic, with a more like interesting vision that just doesn't sound like, you know, just, hey, let's throw some violins. Da, 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 da. Okay, now let's put a backbeat in there. Okay, backbeat. All right, now let's have somebody rap over it. Like that gets old to me, and it gets stale, and I'm more interested in, like, you know, them creating like music and then worrying about the rapping afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, I'm more focused on the music portion.
It sounds to me, and from what I remember of a lot of the Street Fighter 4 soundtrack, is that a lot of it was just meant to be as like background music. Like, they weren't really interested in making character themes like they did in Street Fighter 2 or Street Fighter 3. So a lot of that melodic stuff kind of went by the wayside in favor of just kind of like grooves that accentuate the type of background that you're fighting in, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like in Street Fighter 4, there were some really killer tracks on that soundtrack, but I just kind of feel like, you know, they turned the sound effects on video games, especially more recently. Like, sound effects have really like bumped up in audio. Like the volume of sound effects nowadays is just so overpowering sometimes that I in almost every single video game that I play, I have to turn the sound effects down.
I agree. I do the
to.
same thing.
Yeah.
Or turn the music up, depending on how it's set. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like whenever I play any of those, which I'm not really a big Capcom fighter fan, well, at least until they come out with Darkstalkers, like a new Darkstalkers.
Darkstalkers 2018.
Yeah. I've kind of like, I'm so kind of tired of the
fucking darker.
The will you stop?
A starker darkly. Yeah.
This theme is kind of lacking in my opinion, but I think it's cool that they've reintroduced some of the Street Fighter, or some of the Final Fight characters into the Street Fighter universe. I never had a problem with that personally. I always kind of felt that the Final Fight series was like a cousin to the Street Fighter series.
Yeah, exactly. And I do like that, you know, here it is in 2014 when this game came out, and they're still reintroducing music that came out in a game that was released. I think the arcade version came out in like 89 or something like that. So it's like 30-something years later, and they're still using music from that game and reintroducing, you know, a new younger generation of players to these tunes, which is very cool. Even though I don't think it was implemented as well as they could have done it here, it's really nice to see that Final Fight music is still iconic enough to be used in games that are still coming out in current day.
Right, and this is as good a time as any to celebrate that, but also complain a little bit about the new Abigail. Again, probably anybody that knows me knows that I'm not a big modern gamer or anything, but I do hear, you know, when Final Fight related things happen, I definitely perk up a little bit. But seeing Abigail as one of the new Street Fighter characters, I was like, oh, that's cool. Then I saw the design and I was like, oh, that's less cool.
Yeah.
It's just very, like, he's such a cartoon. And you know, Abigail in the original Final Fight was, like, to me, legitimately kind of scary. Like,
really imposing, yeah, and he was really hard to beat too.
Yeah, he's just all the charging and the, you know, his face turning red and all that stuff. Like, he's scary. And in this new one, he just feels like a giant gorilla or something. His theme, like I was saying, I'm not going to straight up say it sucks. I don't care for it. It's very hardcore metal, but then it incorporates some melodies from, I think, the theme I mentioned earlier with the motorcycle gang in the last part of Bay Area.
Toilet Gang, I think it's called.
Okay. It incorporates a little bit of those melodic phrases. So again, like you're saying, this music that was composed in 1989 and they're still like kind of reimagining it and stuff. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it. I mean, the Final Fight Double Impact did come out, which was the Magic Sword game. It was Magic Sword, the arcade game, and also Final Fight 1, like the original Final Fight. And that version had its own remixed soundtrack as well, which, was pretty good.
It was remixed by Simon Viklund, who was the guy behind Bionic Commando Rearmed and Payday, who I mentioned, I think, last episode during PixelChat as one of my favorite modern-day composers.
So that game was a nice reimagining of Final Fight and had online co-op mode, which was pretty cool, so you could play Final Fight online. You could drop in and drop out anytime. But other than that, there really hasn't been any Final Fight action. There's been kind of rumors. The producer of the Ace Attorney series really wants to do a Final Fight game, like a remake or
it would be really cool if they just did like an indie-style game published by Capcom, a 2D, maybe in 3 dimensions, but a side-scrolling beat-em-up style, just that feels like Final Fight again with some enhancements. It would be great.
I just think 2.5D is the way to go if you're going to go with Final Fight. Make it polygonal, make the characters rendered in 3D, but make the actual gameplay itself 2-dimensional with the fact that you can go up and down all over the place.
Or even like River City Ransom Underground, like really good sprite art.
Yep.
Make it a 2D game, but beef up that
hand-drawn
quality.
Sparts.
Hand-drawn sprite arts.
Hand-drawn sprites.
Sprite farts.
Yeah. So that's kind of my opinion. We're coming up on the 30th anniversary of Final Fight 89, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Haggar's going to be the one in the wheelchair this time around.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe they'll do something for the 30th anniversary. Who knows? But at this point in time, in late 2017, there's been no rumors of any kind of new Final Fight game in the series, which is unfortunate because it's one of my favorite franchises.
Well, maybe this episode will cause Capcom to take notice.
Oh, definitely.
These guys know Final Fight. Let's do it.
Yep. How can they resist?
Exactly.
Maybe.
So just a little bit about the composer that wrote the music for Ultra Street Fighter 4, Hideyuki Fukasawa. His entire career was with Capcom. Started off with Chaos Legion in 2003. Worked on some other games like Mobile Suit Gundam, Monster Hunter Frontier, all the Street Fighter 4 titles, Super Street Fighter 4 and Ultimate, as well as the original Street Fighter X Tekken, and his latest game was just last year, Street Fighter 5. He co-composed that soundtrack with a lot of other people. He's also done a lot of anime, like Full Metal Alchemist, The Flowers of Evil, Fate Stay Night, and Token Ranbu Katsugeki. So he's both in the anime front and composing some VGM as well. So there you have it. He's a new composer to this show, so I wanted to make sure he got a little bit of credit.
Word.
All right, so we've got an outro track that is from... Well, Cam, why don't you explain a little bit about the new Mad Gear game that's coming out soon?
Okay, yeah. Well, just on a whim, I got in touch with a friend of mine is like a friend of a friend, who had done some game design for that friend. And I never thought anything would come of this, but I was just like, hey man, what would you think about making a 2D beat 'em up? And how much would that cost? And all that kind of stuff. And he was just like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And I was blown away. And so we started,
awesome.
we started hashing out some concepts and whatnot. And eventually what we landed on was sort of basically an 8-bit, I would say gameplay resembles closely to Double Dragon on the NES. It's 2.5D or however you want to say it, and it's a beat 'em up. And the idea was, we would help come up with the story for it and write the music. And so, kind of beyond my wildest dreams, that actually has come to fruition, and we're releasing it on December 1st of 2017. So we're pretty much done with it.
Excellent. Awesome. So that will be literally 2 days from now as of the release of this podcast. So yeah, that Friday. So this coming Friday, guys. Yeah. Check. We'll put a link up to it in the Facebook group for sure, because Mike and I have a little special guest appearances in this game.
Yeah, we have voices and and stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we are ninjas, and I think level 2 I think is the ninja level.
That's exactly right.
And then I'm the ninja boss as well as one of the ninjas, and you are a ninja, Mike.
Yes.
Yes.
So the fun fact about about this for VGM podcast listeners is that it's like a VGM podcast all-star cast, sort of. We've got Robin Purnell from Rhythm and Pixels are the androids in level 5. We've got Rob F. Switch as one of the bosses. Who am I missing? Oh yeah, Josh and Emily from VGM Jukebox are in the guards in level 1. So we've got like an all-star cast sort of all the people that I knew. Of course, I didn't know some of the other people like Pixelated Audio and those guys, but we've got a pretty cool cast there.
Yeah, I've gotten the chance to play like some of the beta versions of the game, and hearing my own voice coming out of enemies that I'm beating up is it's such a cool feeling.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So maybe like I said, I think we said this a couple episodes ago. Maybe Mike and I will do a PixelTunes plays of that game. Once the final version is out, then we'll do a video and get together and play it.
Yeah,
I'd love
that'd be cool.
to do that. That'd be cool. Yeah, definitely. We should do a PixelTunes beat 'em up.
That would be amazing.
Like you could
we should
play
just do a
as Mike
VGM podcast beat 'em up.
Yeah, like you could play as like Mike and
Get
Ed.
like helper characters.
Yeah,
And like the Mad Gear
That'd
could guest star in it.
You could they'd be the band playing in like the background.
Oh yeah, perfect.
There you go.
Perfect.
There you go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's like one of the levels, like you go by and you got all like chibi versions of them.
Oh,
So
nice.
you go up to the bad guy. The bad guy would be like, I don't know, who would our bad guy be? If we were to fight a bad guy,
Good question.
I don't know.
The guys who made Lords of Shadow.
Obligations outside of the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bosses
And you
and
go up to
school
him and be
teachers.
like,
and-
you have to go to work, and then you'd be like, no, and they'd be like, wow.
Who did most of the composition for the game?
Okay, so I composed one track. Chris, our sax player, composed the story music and one of the tracks. So it's kind of split up between. There's 5 people in the band, but 4 people composed on this. And the one we're
cool.
going to play was composed by Adam Ford, who's our trumpet / keyboard player, and he's kind of our music theory guy. Like he knows all that stuff. And I was like, hey, we need something that sounds like Bach. Because the level, you're fighting the Whig Party, which is one of the city's gangs. And the Whig Party are basically like fancy Austrian composer-looking guys. And so we wanted something that has sort of a classical theme. It ended up having more like almost a Castlevania vibe, but I think it turned out really great, and I'm proud of it, even though I had very little part. Also, quick note, Cameron Werma did the drum programming on all these.
Oh, nice.
We would
cool.
get, because he's got the Famitracker experience. We composed most of our stuff in either Fruity Loops or MuseScore, which are, so this is not, at least in the most technical sense, this is not chiptune. It's like emulated chiptune, I guess.
It's what they call fake bit.
There you go.
Fake bit. Yeah.
But the drums are legit, and they're done in like the NES Konami style. But basically, we would give him like our basic drum ideas, and he would actually execute them, and he did a fantastic job. So we're very thankful for that.
Awesome, very cool.
That's very cool.
Nice to see a little bit more and a little bit more PixelTunes influence on this game as well.
Yeah,
Exactly,
especially in
yeah.
the music, considering he's a very close friend of ours. So
Yep.
Excellent. So let's give it a listen, and that will be it for PixelTunes Radio episode 102.
Yeah.
So what's
yeah.
what's the Mad Gear up to after this game comes out?
Well, we're trying to up like our YouTube page and that kind of thing. Like we've always posted our live videos and whatnot. The quality's always been a little bit dodgy, but we've actually started doing some here at my place with like proper equipment and everything. And they've turned out really great. So definitely check out youtube.com/themadgear for stuff. We're gonna try to be consistent, like at least on a monthly basis, of either releasing a live video or a music video or just some kind of content. So that's definitely the place to kind of keep up with us.
Cool. Yeah, your Castlevania video was really cool, where you guys kind of integrated yourself into the levels of the game. I really enjoyed that. That was a
Appreciate
lot of fun
that,
to watch.
man. Yeah, the
Yeah.
pixel art from Castlevania 4 is really fantastic. So it was great to kind of repurpose it,
Absolutely. All right, so thank you for being on our show, dude. We really appreciate it. We love always talking with you, and especially about tough tunes and Final Fight and all this
Always,
really
man.
excellent stuff that we all have these fanatical opinions on. So
Yeah, I am always honored to be on. So anytime y'all need a guest, just let me know.
we will ring you up
Yep.
Word.
to tell you that Jessica has been kidnapped.
Yeah.
And we need your help.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I wanted to marry her.
Jessica. Like in the Street Fighter cartoon.
Exactly. All right, so what's our next episode about, Mike?
Well, our next episode is a secret.
Secret episode. Which means somebody will die.
Probably.
All right,
Snap.
cool.
Yeah. So we want to go ahead and thank Cam again for appearing on the show. You can check out us at facebook.com/groups/PixelTunesRadio, where you can chat with all of our listeners and fans, people who enjoy video games and video game music. You could also check us out at pixeltunesradio.com and comment there. You could also shoot us an email and a Pixel Chat question, pixeltunesradio@gmail.com. And of course, we're on Twitter as well, at PixelTunesRadio.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going out with the music from the Mad Gear game. This is Act 4, I Dig Your Wig. We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye!